Yeah, thanks, Abhay. Thank you everyone for logging in, and hope you have a insightful session today. Uh, so the topic for today is the AI led art of listening to your users. I'll pass on the baton to Jayesh to do a small keynote. Post that, we'll break out into a panel discussion. So uh, over to you, Jayesh.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So great to have all of you. I mean, it's early, I think, probably in India, I think to start off the day early, but I think a lot of the other parts of APAC, I think it's already closing on lunch kind of a thing. So great to all of you and great to meet as well. I'm Jayesh. I head the Global Insights division for Entropic and been in the industry for about close to 2 decades now. And AI, UX, and a lot of these terms are, to be very honest, new to me. Been doing it, practicing it for probably about a year now. Otherwise, been with Ipsos, Kantar, Nielsen, GfK for the last 18 years of my career in custom research per se. So that's where the expertise per se has been. But this is a field which is increasingly becoming interesting, challenging, and I think it's the future. That's what led me to join Entropic and figure out what's out there in the future in terms of new ways of understanding people like us, how we interact with interfaces, platforms, because that seems to be the way we are going, right? And I think the larger perspective is that increasingly we are talking less to human beings. I think we are talking and interacting a lot with a platform per se. And I think the challenge then is around more about how do you humanize that experience, which each one of us or the larger visitors to platforms or interfaces are having, right? I mean, probably the experience per se which people need to have in these platforms needs to be closer to how they would interact with human beings. I mean, that's how increasingly when you speak to clients and designers, I think the whole perspective is about giving that very, very intuitive feel of how would I want to either navigate or experience or figure out stuff on platforms per se is where we are heading to. And it has its own advantages, right? I think once you strike the right chord and the right connect with the users or the visitors, I mean, whatever name we want to call the people who come on interfaces, it comes with retention and higher revenue and the different numbers floating around for it. But the larger perspective is that it goes back to the old marketing philosophy of retaining and creating enhanced experience for the person to stay back and use your platform more and talk about it to many others who are either using competition platforms or who have probably not even started using certain kind of platforms. But I think on the back end, the fact is also that while how we see things, how we buy stuff has evolved, I think drastically over the last decade per se. Some of the ways in which we have been still trying to capture a user behavior or a user response, it's still evolving. I think it's come a long way, but there are still some challenges in the terms of how we capture responses, right? And while there are 5 points on the slide, I think the turnaround time and cost has been, perennially out there in terms of doing any kind of research. I think time for a large extent is getting solved big time through tech, the intervention of tech. I think today, if you say to somebody that research is happening real time, that's no more a differentiator. I mean, that's become closer to hygiene. But I think depending upon the kind of researches you do, and specifically in UX, there are certain kind of stuff which you do where probably there is still a lag between when you collect a response vis-a-vis when you probably see the final impact of it. So that's still, something very critical to monitor. And with the quantum of research, I think all of us are doing in terms of understanding user behavior. I think the single system of record is very important. I think if you have a lot of the behaviors in one place using machine learning and a lot of other tech which we have, I think there's a lot more to discover and unearth and make most of it. That's one part of it which I have not really seen a big solve for. But the critical point on this slide is, I think, probably points 1 and 2, where I think we're still grappling a lot with either not great way of collecting data, which is more about access to respondents, probably having this larger divide on, do you go to a set of people who take tests repeatedly? I mean, there are pools which are very easily accessible, kind of a thing. Vis-a-vis, you go back to respondents from online panels and stuff, and the whole idea is about understanding how much of bias is already there in the way you are testing it, right? So all these challenges still exist per se, and hence, while collecting a user feedback, I think what we need to be very clear on is picking the right research tools, not only in terms of analysis, in terms of even processing the data, access to people, kind of thing. And that's one thing which is very critical. I think the second part, which is very critical, is again in terms of setting clear goals. I think one challenge which we increasingly find, while interacting on various projects with end users, is that sometimes, we probably have multiple objectives or multiple tasks, which we try to evaluate, and that probably is not the way a typical person interacts with an interface. So we just need to be very clear about what's our end goal, kind of a thing, and have those tasks very simplified per se to the user who's taking the test. I think a lot about the next 2-3 points is what I already spoke about regarding, there is a lot out there which we are capturing in terms of behavior, putting it together in one place, and I think running algorithms probably to get more out of that already exhibited behavior is probably where I think we aren't seeing much action now. I think there's a lot of analytics out there which helps you to understand how navigation and experiences out there in real time. But I mean, I haven't seen a lot of path-breaking work in terms of looking at existing behaviors itself to come out with a lot more actionable insights. Hence, probably while collecting user feedbacks, these are the points which we can watch out for. And that's the place where I think the future is going to be in terms of really looking at the so-called the subconscious action of users on interfaces. And I've always reconciled it from the angle of are you looking at navigation and experience more in terms of a response, or are you looking at navigation and content experiences more around reactions? Because I think the moment it goes down the line of response, there is already a lot of rationalization which happens, which isn't probably the real way we interact with interfaces. I think we are far more system one reactive, and that's probably where I think a lot of the experiments which we do with consumers today fails. And facial coding, eye tracking, and voice tonality per se helps us solve a lot in terms of understanding really intuitively how users go about interacting with the interfaces. And I think the beauty of it and in the future is also about doing all this as DIY, right? I think we are moving to a place where all of us are running against time to take decisions. I think most of our decisions had to be taken as of yesterday, and I think the traditional way of floating out a brief to an agency and figuring out and working, I think that's already, I think, cut down a lot in the UX part of it. I think if you look at media testing or shopper research per se, this still evident way of working, but I think UX is one space where I think the agency reliance in terms of interaction and stuff has moved out a lot. I think a lot of the people are doing a lot of things individually using DIY platform per se, because I think again what it helps you to do is start off without uh, asking anybody or waiting for somebody to launch your study or something. I think it's all about the clarity which you require, and as long as the system is efficient and integrated with the access to the audience which you want, I think you are there to launch your study and move on. So I think that's where DIY platforms play, and I think that's increasingly the way we are going to do UX. Anyway, and at Entropic, with the kind of futuristic technologies we have, I think what we really help is in two ends. One is about getting it faster, doing it faster with the seamless integration in terms of the kind of stimuluses which you upload, the way you would want to access the kind of people you want to access. It's all there out there on the platform. And with the futuristic technologies of eye tracking, facial coding, and voice tonality as well built into UX, I think it just helps you to see far more quality actionable insights. And I think for me the most interesting thing has been taking that leap way beyond observation based UX to putting a number against a lot of these unbiased actions which users are taking on the platform. So looking forward to this discussion with all the experts in this field who have been doing a lot of interesting work in this domain, and would want to pass this back to Shrey to take the discussion forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Jayesh. That was, an insightful keynote and, good kickstart for this discussion. So, we'll break into a panel discussion, and before that, I'll just do a quick introduction of the esteemed panelists that we have on board today. So we have Mr. Varun Torka, who is the head of product at Grab, and he's also worked at brands like Ola before this. He's worked across different functions within product management. So we have Varun, we have Mr. Andrew H from Pluang. So he's the VP of product and design, and he's also worked with brands like TikTok and Grab in the past. So again, vastly experienced. We have Mr. Sunit Sharma and Basil from SPH Media. Deputy head of product design, and Basil is also part of the same team, so same function. And lastly, we have JJ as well. JJ is again head of customer product at Property Guru, and he's also worked with brands like Maybank and Digibank, and super happy to have you all on board. Let's sort of dive straight into the discussion. So yeah, I mean, my first question would be to Varun on how do you think that organizations today can ensure that democratization of user research leads to actionable insights and positive outcomes when it comes to user research and gathering customer feedback.
Hey, Shrey. So first of all, I'd just like to thank Shrey and the organizers here for just organizing this panel and having us here. So I think it's going to be a very interesting topic, the theme of the hour. So looking forward to a lively discussion. On the question of just how do we convert research to actionable insights and outcomes, right? I think this particular question is definitely an important one, and uh, sort of translates over the technology which is being used to conduct the research. Like, irrespective of the technology which is being used, we need to make sure that the research actually translates to insights and outcomes. Otherwise, there's no point, right? So, in my mind, I think of research, broadly classify research into two different buckets. One is a more mission-oriented, project-based research, which is, suppose I'm building a new feature and I am trying to understand how this should exactly look, what are the features which should be part of it. So, a research which is very focused with an end goal in mind. And for this kind of research, I think it's sort of easier to lead to actionable insights because we started out with a definite goal in the first place, right? So it might be an early stage research where we are just looking at different concepts and thinking of like early stage concepts, or it might be late stage where we are doing UI or UX testing. Now, this is one broad category of research, which I would say, which is mission based. The second kind of research which every organization should engage in is sort of open-ended regular check-ins with users. So this might be things like NPS surveys or or brand awareness surveys. So some sort of a regular check-in with users, which just helps us be honest in terms of are we focused on the right user problems. So for this second category of research, because it's more open-ended, I think like organizations need a way to make sure that the research is sort of communicated to the relevant teams in question. So for example, the stuff that you might be hearing from users might be related to the app, the operations part, the delivery part, all those different aspects. So there needs to be a proper process, and the leaders should be espousing this process, which ensures that the insights are getting communicated to the relevant teams. And then each team should have a way of managing those insights themselves. So there's that two aspects. I think one is a central process, and then each team should have its own process. Yeah, I think those are just some early thoughts. I would, in the interest of time, I think we can just continue the discussion from there.
I think very very valid points, and I'll also like to hear from Sunit and Basil, and if you want to add to what Varun said, or just like share your thoughts on democratization of research across the organization.
Yeah, so I think here at SPH we take an approach where we believe that research at the end of the day is something that we would like everyone to be a part of and would like everyone to see. However, I think when we do with our users, it's also important for team of researchers to be able to manage that relationship as well. Our users at the end of the day, they don't see us in different teams, but they see us as one organization. And we want to ensure that the touch point that we interact with them when they come and help us or when they come and support our activities are one that is at the end of the day positive. So when we democratize research on our side of the house, how we do it is that we basically invite the people who are involved in our products to come on board, to take a look, to observe, to see the activities happen. From our experience, we know that it gives us a couple of benefits. One of which is that it allows some of the product makers to actually see how their product looks like. And how do users look at the product, and it makes it a bit easier for them to also visualize some of the issues or some of the challenges that our users might actually encounter using our product. We find this a lot easier because when we move further downstream to have conversations about refining our product, it sets a mental model in everybody's heads so that people will actually be able to know, oh yeah, when we're talking about this, I've seen this happen. That being said, it's also important on our side to also manage that process. We want to be able to ensure that people actually take the best possible outcomes out of it, and that everyone actually is able to get something out of the experience as well, without one party or without one organization, or sorry, one of our person that we invite into the conversation to dominate it as well. So I think in this case, democratization is important, but then the role of the researcher or the role of the research team is also to moderate that conversation to ensure that everybody is able to actually benefit out of it, and that we don't have a dominant voice. What
Yeah.
about you?
Yes, going beyond that, what Basil had just said, what we also do is sometimes stakeholders, when they get these insights, they don't know how to uncover it, how to use it positively for the best outcomes, right? So what we do is we take them in the entire product development and product design process. So what we do is we involve them into ideation and brainstorming sessions through different workshops, where we use these actionable insights into positive outcomes by different ideas which we can work on. And then once the feature is launched, and then we see a success, they can actually see a full chain of product development life cycle, right? Research was done, there was an outcome, there was an insight, we have used this outcome to convert into positive outcomes, and then the product or feature gets successful. It becomes a wow factor for everyone, including stakeholders, different departments. So that's how we democratize our user research, and it also helps everyone to be more excited to be a part of the entire product design development process.
Yeah, awesome. I think thanks for your input and your perspective on this. I'd also request Andrew to chime in with his thoughts on this.
Thank you. All right, so I think on my end, before I go into it, I just want to maybe first define democratization. And for me, that's essentially who is going to participate in the research and ultimately who would be shared to that can help move that decision or investment towards its positive outcomes. And so in an org, I first believe that it's best if the entire product team is involved. So that includes not just the product managers, but also the designers and engineers, even the analysts. In an open invite, but again, you're just sharing that responsibility as partners to ensure that we're operating the same level of information. We're aligned in equal weight of responsibility towards that mission. And that we have that same ownership to drive and inspire us to care about the problems that we're trying to solve for and who we're trying to solve them for. So after that, I think it's then important to consider who we're going to share the research with in a way that's going to lead towards those positive actionable outcomes. And so for this, I'll just keep it short because I think a lot of my colleagues here have some very positive things around this. But I think for me, just two things to consider, just to add on. First is who are the decision makers to include in the power map. So determining not only who the key decision makers are that you want to invite to that sharing session, but also consider who are the sponsors. So these are the people who those decision makers trust that you can win over to help you convince them to invest in your ideas and your roadmap afterwards. The second then is in terms of how to present in a very influential way. For me, I think the best way is to convince people. The best way to convince people is to make them believe that they came to the decision themselves. And you can do that through manipulative bias setting. So what that means is that you can present information in a way that skews towards an obvious solution that makes best use of the information to solve that specific problem or to synthesize that insight towards an actionable outcome.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome hook to get people to believe and latch onto the trend. So yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. So let's move on to the second question, and we will hear from JJ for the first time. So JJ, I just wanted to hear from you on the creative ways that you've seen teams use AI and DIY platforms for gathering user insights in your past life, or like other examples as well. But we'd love to kick off the discussion with you as well with this one.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Shrey. So before I just jump straight into giving examples, what the creative ways are, I think we just need to make it very clear and we draw that line, especially since, our other panelists has mentioned already, like when to get user research and to get the insights, it is always quite human driven. I mean, we must always remember that. So even when we say AI, DIY platform, it's not 100% automated where you can just take a step back. We will always need to partner with the tool itself. So when I mention it this way, so we just need to remember anything that we built, whatever that we want to achieve at the end, we need to set the criteria, the goal, or even to be very clear as a human person, what actually we're trying to draw out of it. Now, why I gave these examples, even mention about this is because without this context, I would jump into some of the examples and you would say, wait, there's a lot of human intervention. But that's true, actually. There's no AI at this point that you can just sit down and take a step back and let it run by itself. So that being said, some of the creative tools that I've actually basically seen, it all revolves around the AI emulating being a user in itself. What the AI or most of the tools that I use, they just try their very best being implemented by whatever as a human we can do, go through the journey as what, if I'm a user of a single platform, I'll just create rules and an experience that, hey, you just need to come from point A and go to point B, and you just tell me from the AI, how long does it take for you to get there? And is it even possible or not? And there are a lot of companies that have actually implemented this even before they roll out platforms, before they start gathering user insights, so that they can drive the research of the user insights later. A very good examples are gaming companies, actually. So if you imagine a game, right, every level that you create, you need to have a path you need to do something to pass on to the next level. And humans do that, right? We have to keep trying it. But imagine if you set this rule that, hey, you have to pass through this stage, whatever way is possible within the world, and we'll just set and see what this AI does. And if the AI can pass it or not. If the AI can't pass it, then there's something wrong with the user journey already. So they have been using such experiences on games as well, so that they use that and they understand, oh, okay, this level is actually quite tough to progress. Is this something good? And then they'll plug it into when they go it live, then they'll see whether the experiences coincide with a user or not, an actual live user. So those are the things that I can give you as an example. But from this in itself, I've seen some other smaller companies actually that implement the same system for their experiences of using that particular platform, right? It's not a game, but let's say for them to place an order or for them to do certain tasks, what are the actions they have to do? They can set this already, and they just want to see whether it is actually going through or not. So this is one experience, and I've seen they've used that is quite creative. The other experience is to emulate as a user in itself. Now, there are a lot of platforms out there, internet-based platform that has human intervention that is our actual users. For example, sellers and buyers, especially dual platforms that has dual marketplace. So, and there are a lot of things such as when you do things like ratings and reviews, you give 5-star, 3-star to a particular seller, things like that. So when you think of that, right, with so many of that, how do you know whether one is true or not, and whether there's an experience? How do you know when somebody gives you 3-star, 5-star? So the user, this experience can be emulated from an AI perspective. With the things like ChatGPT and things coming up in this world, I've seen sneak peeks of how people are developing chats to emulate as if you are, a user pretending to be one, and interact with this particular seller, right, or a buyer, whichever may be, and to validate whether this 3-star, 5-star is actually, an experience that is given by the particular, buyer seller. So those are some of the creative ways that I've seen. Really, in the end, is to the limit of what a human has actually built. But again, always remember AI, DIY platforms, it's a platform we use. We need to dictate what we want to draw first, then we'll be able to do it properly.
No, I think makes sense that don't let AI make you work, but you like human intervention and defining the scope of work is like super relevant, and mastering that is, I think, going to be an essential skill for people in across across the
Yes,
across the board, not only technology. So
exactly. Actually, to dive deeper into that, to a lot of people, I know AI is, I mean, especially now, the most recent AI stories we keep hearing, Chat GPTs and the Agent GPT. I think a lot of there are a lot of articles out there, a lot of videos out there where they see the miracle of, hey, 1-2 clicks and AI solve the thing for me. That is not real. I have to say, when you dive into using AI, it's not that simple. The prompting is tough. And Shrey, like you said, there will be a whole host of group of new talents that coming in that how do you train that AI, or what is the prompt you want to give in? That's actually very important. And it's a different skill set.
yeah. Awesome. And JJ, just moving on from this question to the next one is how do you build empathy, and how do you build an understanding, a very close understanding of your users' psyche, users' needs through the use of AI, and ensure that you're doing justice to what their what your users want.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this one is simpler to actually explain, because we, in a way, are already going through this without the need of AI or anything else. I'm sure all of us, or most of us in the product team or any of our startups or companies, we look at data and we have data scientists to explain to us, hey, revenue is growing this much because this number of actions is being done, and vice versa. Those are the data we get. And of course, with more tools such as Anthropics, like facial recognition and things like that, we should be able to get more data. That's it. But how we interpret the data is what we need to be transparent. So in order for us to go and let everybody know, like, hey, why is using AI or using such tools actually help more? We need to let, example, data scientists or whoever who churn the data and to present it to us, what is the logic for coming to this conclusion? When you have, even for me, like when I look at a certain revenue and I look at it and say, hey, this number's going up. Why is it going up? And they'll tell me, oh, because there's this number of actions that decrease or increase. And I will be saying, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? So in this same scenario, in this same question, how do you build empathy and understanding on them, is the moment we know what is the rules that was churned out in terms of the data, we should be able to understand we will provide empathy automatically, because we say this is an unbiased data, it's true, it's fact, you will take it, it's all how you consume it to ensure that it's given. So the key point is to give the transparency of what the rules that you have set, or if you don't have the transparency, speak to whoever who has built this framework and understand from their perspective. And that's how you get to build your empathy and understanding, because then I'll know, oh, okay, the user actually needs this. They stop in this progress because their eyes were looking somewhere else, or their mouse pointers were looking somewhere else. If you give me just the data alone, it doesn't mean anything until I sit down and understand, oh, you were actually tracking this part. So I think the core thing, again, is a communication with the builder themselves. Human interaction has to come in. And that is, in itself, just building that block is good enough for you to continuously have understanding on the user experience.
Yeah. No, and I think the first point that you made is also ties into this, that if you have an empathetic human who's sort of running this function, I think they can do a much better job at analyzing what the users' expectations might be, and then serving the users. So makes a lot of sense. Thank you, JJ, for that. Um, going on to the next question, Varun. So like all mature organizations, they have their own user research workflows across different stages of the product development life cycle. So how do you integrate AI and DIY platforms, or like a single system of record across those different stages where you need to conduct user research?
Got it. Hey, so in a nutshell, right, I think when I look at the latest advance of AI, which is LLMs, I think of them as aiding on 3 dimensions. One is basically in the realm of providing a thinking or a researching aid. Like we have this expert system and it can help us to think, consider all dimensions in a faster way. Second is they can help us in summarization and classification. So for example, we just give them a data and they can give us sentiment analysis of the feedback that has been given. So that's second. And the third, I think, is obviously content generation. Like all of the generative AIs help us with generating like new content. Of course, it needs human intervention to validate and vet that content, but it gives us a good starting point. So across the entire chain of the user research workflow, I would say we can apply these three. We can see which of these three facets are important and then apply that accordingly. So for example, just to take one example, right? We have to suppose do audience shortlisting. We have to identify who to reach out to for getting feedback. So that needs some data analysis, some user segmentation. So AI can help us as a thinking aid on how to segment our database, our set of users, as well as actually do some number crunching as well, like give them some data and ask AI to do some classification of users. So that's just one example. And in terms of the caveats, I think we just need to look out for the biases we know that these systems have. So the biases, the two core biases being hallucination, that these AIs can confidently give us wrong responses as well. So a human oversight does need to happen. And the second is data privacy. If you're using an open source, a freely available version of this system, we know that the prompts which are sent to these systems, they can be used by the organization to do training in the future. And that training can then expose data which might be sensitive to our company. So we need to make sure if you're using these freely available tools that we are not using it for critical information which can leak out into the public information sphere. So those would be my thoughts here, like in terms of what are the benefits and what are the challenges. And then we can look at each step of the user research workflow to see how those aspects translate into that step.
No, I think very succinctly put and very coherently, you articulated the challenges as well as the use cases. So Jayesh, like I think some of the use cases are something that we also like strongly advocate. So would like to hear from you on this as well, please.
So the words, DIY for me, coming from like a hardcore traditional background, I mean, itself was challenging, right? Because you never did anything DIY. I mean, you always, build questionnaires, you build models, and you had, the surveys ran out, the data used to come back. And then, last couple of years is when probably you started feeling that there's a lot out there which you probably don't need, you don't need many others to do it. You probably need to put this all into a system where it can be menu driven, and a lot of the work fundamentally which we do itself is, pretty standardized in terms of how you launch it, kind of a thing. So that way, I think, DIY, is disrupting a lot of stuff. I think the way we have been working in ourselves, because I think all of us, when we started working, we worked in a very different way, and this is like a new way of working. And when we put up platforms in terms of DIY, I think the first challenge has been around the fact that while we tend to recommend and insight and advise a lot of our clients on how platforms and interfaces need to be very intuitive, I think one challenge I've always faced is that when we build our own platforms, we probably tend to lose that perspective, right? So I think the way an end client would actually want to seamlessly log into the platform, set up a study, have access to, integrating and accessing respondents seamlessly, looking at how the workflow is happening, getting the insights out of it. I think when you do the DIY part, all these need to, intuitively strike to, I mean, anybody who logs into the system per se. And from an AI perspective, it's more about, I think, the depth of analysis which is out there. I think there's a lot of metrics today out there on based on basic eye tracking. I think there is a lot of system metrics there around clickability, hovering around, and the general navigation which people go through. So I think that's one part of it. But I think in the future there is going to come a lot of quantification of what these behaviors are. Today, I think UX is still a lot of observation based and interpretations which are to an extent on clickability and stuff which are still action and behavior. But I think there is a lot of things out there which still needs to be clarified per se. So when you build the system around DIY and AI, I think what you need to probably fit in is there is a lot which is going to change in this space probably in the next 1 or 2 years in terms of quantifying still a lot of the subjectivity which is there. So I mean that's the way I see it.
Yeah. No, thanks, Jayesh, for sharing your thoughts. So again, moving back the spotlight on Sunit and Basil. What do you think are some of the ethical considerations in using AI for research, and how do you ensure that organizations are respectful, responsible? What are some of the caveats that they should be aware of? I think Varun also spoke about it briefly, but yeah, would want to know more from both of you.
So I think just building on what JJ has said earlier, a lot of what AI has been used and has in the context of user research ultimately still requires a lot of human intervention. At the end of the day, the reason why is because we are human beings, and human beings are fundamentally quite irrational creatures. We are actually very diverse, and what AI helps us to do is it helps us to try to streamline it. But at this point in time, we don't have the capability or the ability to actually understand people in that very granular environment. Even more so here at SPH, because we work with people, or our users range from people who are school students to people who are in their senior years, and this means people between the age of 8 to 80. We're looking at a very big environment of people, and we're looking at a very big audience profiles, which are very distinct, unique, and often very separate from each other. So that leads to a lot of us having to just connect the dots, having to connect the nuances and the individual behavioral stuff there. So I think one of the examples that you might have seen quite recently that has been used in recent weeks is about ChatGPT building user personas. And one of the things that we actually look at it, and I had played around with it for fun of it, was that it helped you to see a lot of the very fundamental basis of things that we could know, and things that we can actually understand from sources and information. These are desk research stuff, and they are great. However, we still need to supplement them with information that is very unique to either our industry or very unique to our audience profile. And so I think the whole point and consideration here is we need to find a balance between using AI and to support the work that we do, but also to be able to have enough human intervention that we are able to ensure that the work we do or the information that we get translates to what we have here. Ultimately, the main point of user research is to have that ability to find well-informed, even make well-informed decisions based on the information we have, and there is that degree of accuracy that is needed by our stakeholders, by our organization, by our design team, to be able to actually plan and create the right things based on the insights that we provide them.
Yes. Yeah, I think on top of that, there are two things I would like to say is how can we use AI for planning the projects, organizing it really well. I think that's where we have to be more responsible and respectful in terms of our approach. And the reasons, because if you see, AI kind of learns from us, right? And it's data saved to use it in future purposes, right? So how can we make sure we replace those important and crucial data points, or rather, I would say, how can we use it in such a way that our core information about our users and other information doesn't lose or doesn't share it with the tool itself. And second is if you can start using this AI products to synthesizing or probably organizing things well after the research, that would be a better idea. That would be more responsible, I would rather say. Yeah, these are two points I would like to.
Yeah, so I think from our experience, I think the conclusion we have come up with when it comes to technology, not just AI, but the right tool for the right purpose in the right environment is extremely important. And this three needs to align. When we choose products or we choose tool, we need to ensure that all this actually creates a net benefit for us. We should not be using tools, or we should not be using technology for the sake of technology's sake, or no, we should be talking to people for the sake of talking sake. Because at the end of the day, the point of it is to create that sweet spot of good information, of good insights, one that is not only useful, but one that actually has tangible benefits for us as a team, for us as an organization as well.
Yeah, understood. So, I mean, it's a critical factor when you sort of analyze what sort of tool at what stage of, the product development. Question, and I'll go to Andrew for this. Is that how can AI help identify patterns and trends in user behavior that's like not immediately apparent through traditional way of carrying out research, through an agency or maybe even in house. So how is it different, and how is it how do you identify um, or you spot trends that are otherwise not visible, Andrew?
Right. Thank you, Shrey. So first, before maybe going into that, I just want to maybe note what I believe are two perhaps stages that we're going through right now with AI and how that's affecting user research. So the first stage I think that we're in right now is that AI is acting more like a tool to empower existing researchers. But eventually, and I believe this is going to come quite quickly, and probably in the next 5 to 10 years, it may even get good enough to eventually replace the researchers. Not a reality that I think most people are willing to entertain, but it's the reality I think we need to be prepared to face. So between an AI and a user researcher, there will always be a skill gap. And that skill gap is in the efficiency, the quality, as well as the output of where AI is going to beat out the researcher. And that's going to lead to identifying patterns and trends that traditional research methods are not going to be able to keep up with. So, this gap is going to start, I think, first with the methodology. And again, this is tied back to what I mentioned before about the first stage we're in, which is empowering the researchers. So, it starts with even just the very first part, which is in the research methodology, which is just the hypothesis, generating different potential directions to further validate for the researcher to explore with them and the product team. And it's already good enough to start generating a gold standard level of these questions and hypotheses, and even the format of which the interview should be held. So auto synthesis of the notes, interview notes, is something that we're already seeing in meetings. Is the next level of that is going to be the research synthesis, as well as the research outcomes, which will all be summarized and conducted much more accurately and efficiently. And I believe the role of a researcher will begin to start transitioning more to the role of a reviewer before it is then eventually overtaken by the AI. So this, I think, doesn't just affect the researcher side. I also believe that this is going to affect the interviewee and the consumer side as well, because as AI progresses, the data that we have, that the companies have on us or that we own, will eventually be used as a digital fingerprint into what I would maybe want to call a persona fingerprint. And so then to take it further, when these platforms start to connect with each other, so this AI can connect with our data, or it can connect with the data platforms, which actually some of my friends are doing startups right now. I believe it's going to be taken a step further whereby the research AI will be able to make very predictable questions and responses out of the digital persona fingerprints that we have to then automatically conduct research for us. And essentially the end result will end up being a very highly accurate correlated response mechanism of which the user research will be conducted, and the outputs can be used into actionable insights to inform products that are eventually going to be built. And I think you're going to start seeing that in the next 10 years. And so that's, for me, what are some of the early, I think, assumptions that I have in terms of how AI is going to evolve, but also how it's playing a role today and already beating out certain researchers' methodologies in terms of finding and identifying those patterns and trends that we're already not able to catch efficiently today.
Yeah, and the rate at which things are changing is also unprecedented. So we'll see new and exciting things in the next 5 to 10 years. Like you said, Jayesh, I would also want to hear from you, because you had a long career and you've done a lot of traditional research with the top agencies as well. So where do you find there's like discernible difference between AI based research and the traditional research?
So I think the way I'm looking at AI is more around, how is it helping us while somebody is exhibiting behavior when we are conducting the experiment. And the next part to it is post that behavior is exhibited, because all of us collect so much of user behavior data on the different tasks and everything which we do. Post collecting the behavior, what role can AI play in terms of giving us a lot of information firsthand, right, before we not start the next leg of research or something. So I see it in two buckets. While exhibiting the behavior, how can AI help? And post exhibiting behavior, how can it help? So now, while exhibiting behavior, I think the evolution has been in UX primarily is around, I think when UX started, a lot of the journeys were created by asking people, how did you go about doing a journey? And people would tell us, how they navigated through that particular interface kind of a thing. It evolved into screen recording. I think that was the next step which it took, where we could look at the screen recording and then interpret what was happening. Then I think it further went from there to, clicks, hovering, and let's say a little bit of eye tracking and stuff which came into. So there was a plus in everything. And I think today probably where AI per se is there in that, and what I think at Entropic we have been reconciling is about when people are hovering around certain stuff or clicking around certain stuff, while that's an action, are they still looking at certain parts of the screen? And hence, is there a gap between what is probably the exhibited, while the exhibited behavior is happening? Is there something which we are missing out in terms of what the user is looking on the screen, or some information processing which is still happening? So I think that's where we are trying to play in AI in terms of probably closing the gap and reconciling the complete story there in terms of the action. And while the action is happening, is there something else which the user is using as a behavior there in terms of looking at stuff, comprehending, and stuff. So that's one part of the AI. I think the second part, I think where we are learning a lot daily is that because we are testing a lot of wireframes, a lot of Figma based prototypes and a lot of live websites per se as well. I think what we are really trying to understand is that based on the kind of tasks which we are enabling people to do, the certain spots in the screen and the way people are navigating through, let's say, mobile and web, and both are very different in terms of the interface and the aspect ratios and stuff, right? So what we are trying to also run algorithms and see is that, are there patterns in navigating when somebody, let's say, is navigating through an OTT vis-a-vis a shopping platform versus a fintech platform vis-a-vis any other platform out there. So people, when you're giving tasks to people, they navigate in a certain way, and we are trying to reconcile this at the back end by running algorithms and seeing is there a set way in which people are navigating irrespective of what their end goal in terms of a task to do or an objective to accomplish in an exercise is. So that gives us a lot of head start in terms of planning for the next leg of research in terms of how a certain page needs to be, or how certain elements in the page needs to be. So that's where we are today grappling on AI in terms of maximizing on while the behavior is happening, and also post exhibiting it, what's the head start we can get for the next leg of research per se.
Awesome. Thank you, Jayesh, for the detailed insights on this. Um, and yeah, with this, we wrap up the discussion that we had. Again, I'd like to thank all the esteemed panelists from different parts of APAC for being part of this and passionately engaging in this discussion. Really appreciate you guys coming in and taking out time for this. Also, would want to thank the audience for listening patiently as well. And I see a couple of questions in the chat from the audience. So if it is, if we have time, can we take a couple of those questions? That should be fine, right? Yeah, so I'll go ahead and ask the first one. So someone's asking, it's an anonymous question, but how accurate are the predictions made by AI models when it comes to user behaviors and preferences? um, so like who would want to like take a shot at this?
I can give some insights here. In essence, right, the prediction model, every AI has its own, they are usually in-house set. So the prediction is as good as how you have determined the path to look like. It's very similar to any financial model as well. What's the assumptions that you make? I would say that right now, if we try to scour the internet, the AI models out there that is trying to predict what's happening in the future is very straight line at this point. It doesn't have too much. It works very specific to a selected company only. It's not very general at this point. And I would say for AI now, we should focus on, or in the industry as a whole, should not focus so much on trying to predict the future, but trying to predict the existing trying to emulate the existing experience. So for example, can an AI model predict that I am sad now, or I am unhappy? Or can I predict that right now there is an experience that I'm feeling as a human? Is the AI catching it correctly? And that's the one I think most industries are focusing on, and not so much on predicting the future yet. I think once we lock the first part down, then we can start looking at the outcoming one.
Awesome. Thank you, JJ. uh, the second one is from Pras, which says that can AI integrate with social media data for user research? So any of you like done this in the past or want to share your thoughts?
I think we can go on this. So AI, any tool can integrate with any tool with the right API. I think let's first. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, can AI integrate with social media, and should that be a data point? Absolutely. However, every data point has its flaws. One of the things about social media, or at least if you see things on social media, is people need to be passionate enough to want to comment or to want to do something with the platforms that they have. Often that also means that there's a bias there, and the bias is, what about the people who do not comment? What about people who do not communicate? And we also do need to consider this, because they are also users of our products. They are users, and they are a target population we should consider. Just because one person is slightly more vocal than the other doesn't mean that his or her opinion would have to carry more weightage. At the end of the day, as researchers, we need to consider our market fit, our business fit as well. And once again, it comes back to the concept that finding the right tool, the right people is extremely important. So yes, to give a very short answer to it, it can be done. There are benefits of it, but we also need to know its pitfalls, and we also need to be able to mitigate those pitfalls as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to also just add to what my colleague said here. With regards to the AI integrating to the social media research, it will also really depend on what your goal is, what you're trying to get out of that research. Because at the end of the day, there are some certain limitations, not just in terms of what AI can do on a third-party platform. Because again, it doesn't really understand like who these people actually are behind the comments and all the interactions that are happening. But also you're going to be faced with very real problems that these companies can't even solve themselves, which is bots. And especially bots with a specific agenda. So you may have things such as, for example, maybe bots trying to influence a political election going on, and so you might have bots say, trying to spew a certain direction or public mood visibly, very visibly, in the form of comments and likes into, say, all the hateful posts that are happening on the platform. Therefore, if you try to put an AI to do the research, it might give you false information as to how people are realistically thinking about certain topics that you might have that you want to research. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Thank you for chiming in. We have another question from Gracia, which says that we've been talking about the advantages of AI for UX research, and we all know that AI is not a replacement for real life research for humans. It's just a fantastic tool to have. So, what are some of the limitations of using AI and AI-based platforms for user research? And you touched upon this briefly during the discussion, but if anyone wants to answer this for Gracia.
Yeah, maybe I could just make a quick comment since it's just a follow. I think it slightly follows up to my previous response. At the end of the day, AI is not you. It's not a human being that's going to be able to ultimately be the final end decision maker. And so that comes in the form of you making that decision, but also with how AI is conducting research with someone else. And so that really, at the end of the day, no matter how good AI becomes, you may be able to even trust it to become the end decision maker, but you yourself will likely need to have a certain level of trust that only you can vet out based on all the information that it can provide you. So I think that's always going to be one of the limitations. But second to that, also understand that the limitation comes in the form of the data that you're able to provide it. So I mentioned before about how you might have bots feeding it poor data. You yourself may have to be the one who's always filtering the kind of inputs that you're giving it and providing it in order to synthesize all that research. So I think those are really just the two biggest limitations that you might want to be careful of.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Andrew said a bit about trust, I think one of the things that we have discovered also is that with every new technology in any organization, you have there's a lot of socialization that goes on, and we need to also ensure that the tools that we bring in or AI that bring in creates a good experience for the many people who would trust our insights and stuff like that. If they have a bad experience with it, then that automatically shuts people off and people become a bit more resistant to it. So I think that's where it becomes really important not to just only consider data or the tool that we have, but also to consider how we actually communicate the insights and the findings out of it, and what does it mean for the many other people within the organizations who are not researchers, who are not from our product teams as well, because they and a lot of their workflows will also be affected by some of the things that we do, especially when we include in AI as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Basil and Andrew for taking this up. I don't see any more questions in chat, so I'm assuming we are good there. If there is anything like in the next couple of minutes, feel free to ping your questions on chat. If not, feel free to reach out to us, write to us, and we'll be more than happy to sort of answer those questions for you. I think more or less this brings us to an end of a very, very passionate and intense discussion on the advantages and disadvantages of using AI for user research. We had a great panel from across different industries, and got to hear different perspectives. So I'm hoping that this is a valuable session for all the people who attended. It was for me for sure. But yeah, I mean, thank you everyone for taking out time and sharing your thoughts and listening to what the panel had to say. But yeah, I mean, thank you, and please reach out to us in case you want to deep dive on a particular aspect, or get more information around any of the theme, any of the topics that we discussed today.
Thank you, Shrey.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, JJ, Andrew, Basil, Sunit, Varun, Jayesh, and Shrey. Thank you so much for taking up the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Pleasure
Bye.
having you.
Thank you, Abe.
Everyone, take care.